Okay, we've got one more session before lunch. We've got Carl Bieber from Citrix. He's part of the CTO office, right?
I'll risk the mic again. Get the slide deck up. So it's actually Guy Bieber. That's okay. I kind of have the coolest job at Citrix. So I'm the Director of Strategy and Innovation, and part of my job is a futurist. So in the CTO office, we do a yearly publication of trends, 5-year trend window. And so you can get that at cto.citrix.com if you want it. And the other part of my job is actually working with Citrix Labs, and that's kind of inventing the future. So I get to do 2 of the coolest things. All right, do I have a clicker? Cool. So what we want to do here is start with a little bit of video of maybe a vision of the future. So maybe we can roll that video. Oops. High technical difficulty because I had video, audio stuff in here. So besides what that little kid couldn't get his own juice box, there's a bunch of things in there that you probably noticed, right? Internet of Things, you've noticed moving across devices, interleaving of work and life activities, augmented reality in a lot of different situations. And can we get the slides back, please? But anytime you want to make a change like mixed reality, basically it has to have pain or gain, right? You either got to solve some major pain in the world or you have to give people a major gain or they're not going to change behavior. And so one of the things we wanted to look at is, what are the forces that are changing work right now? Where's the pain right now? And there's a lot of stuff going on here. So the first thing we are is we're infotoxicated, right? So we're getting a doubling of information every year and a half. In the medical field, it's about a 50% increase per year of information. That means at the beginning of a 4-year degree and at the end, you need to know 5 times as much information as when you start it. It's kind of a losing game, right? So we think that hybrid intelligence, computers working with people in more intelligent ways are going to be something that comes pretty quickly. The other big thing we have is we have this epidemic of disengagement at work. So a recent Gallup poll found that 87% of workers worldwide are disengaged at work. That's an astonishing number when you think about it. Another survey found that 73% of employees would like to leave their current job. Now, if you couple this with the fact that millennials and Generation Z want to kind of define how they work and want to have more meaning in their life, this is a real problem for the workplace going forward. The other thing we're seeing is a big movement to freelance working. So one survey predicts that by 2020, we'll have 40% freelance workers in the United States. That's people that don't go to offices anymore, or they have engagements with companies and they go off and do their own thing. The other thing about that freelance working is that they're actually getting more income, right? That wages has been growing 50% year over year for freelance workers. So it's becoming a legitimate alternative to, a normal day job. The other thing at Citrix we've seen a lot of is, of course, remote and flex work. So a Global Summit survey found that about 1/3 of companies expect 50% of their workforce to be remote by 2020. That's a big change. And then we have automation, right? So another Oxford study found that 47% of US jobs are going to be automated away or potentially automated away in the next 10 to 20 years due to machine learning or robotics. Anyone aware of the new robotic McDonald's opening up next month in Phoenix? It's already coming. And then we have this huge problem of productivity. Besides not being engaged, we're losing 4.8 hours a day. And that number looks incredulous, right? But I'll break it down for you. So we basically, we get about 56 interruptions a day, and it takes about 1.2 hours to recover from those interruptions. And we spend about 62 hours in meetings a month, and it takes about a half of those meetings are considered wasted, so that adds another 1.6 hours. And then we spend about 30% of our time on email, half of which that time is wasted, which means we're losing another 1.2 hours. So that's 4.8 hours a day we're losing in productivity. So the interesting thing about that remote and flex work, so there's a recent book called The Digital Renaissance of Work that talks about the productivity gains of remote working. They see 20 to 50% gain in productivity, and it's because it overcomes some of these productivity drains, interruptions, et cetera, that are happening in this other window. But it's not just employees' jobs that are changing or the workplace that's changing, it's also for enterprises themselves, right? They got all these people that are leaving the office, they're working remotely 50% of the time, and facilities are the second highest cost for an enterprise, according to Unwork. And they're only less than 45% utilized. That's a horrible return on investment. It means you need to really rethink how you use space in an enterprise office. The other thing corporations are facing is the need to innovate more quickly, right? So McKinsey's study found that CEOs expect 15 to 50% of their growth to come from disruptive innovation. And then we have the standard things that have been happening for a while in IT, when we call it CABS, right? It's a movement to the cloud, it's automation, it's bring your own everything, which soon may include mixed reality, and it's software as a service, right? So moving everything off-prem and being completely managed by a provider, something like Workplace, et cetera, that does HR management. So with all those forces of change, where could mixed reality help? Where could it provide some gain or take away some pain? And so I think these are some of the areas that it could help in. One is information processing. The cool thing about mixed reality is, that scene where they're in the room and the walls covered with images and the tables covered with images and things like that. Try setting that up with projectors or buying the flat panels to make that real. That's a lot of money. But with a mixed reality headset, I can basically map anything I want in this room, anywhere I want. I have an infinite 360-degree display. And so we think that that's going to increase our working set, right? Memory champions have long found that basically our spatial memory is much better than our other kinds of memory. You can remember where 10,000 objects are in your house, but try and remember 10 numbers. And it's because we're very good spatial learners. And so that's one of the biggest things for information processing. Our brains haven't evolved to handle that new information workload. This is one of the things that could help us. The next one is really making remote work better. So Citrix has long done technology like GoToMeeting, which allows you to share audio and video and many other things online. But what you really want to do is you want to make it more like being there, or better than being there, right? What if I can digitally encode all the interaction that I'm doing with my team? What if I can walk in a space and start where I left off the last time I had a discussion with my team? that's what mixed reality maybe gives us the option to do. And so there's basically some new ideas of productivity that could come out of this. We think that there's kind of new paradigms that are coming. We talked a little bit about infinite displays, and I actually think that'll kill traditional displays, right? A lot of studies have found that 2 displays on your desktop are much more productive than a single display. Well, now I'm giving you an infinite display. Why do I have to buy those 2 displays anymore? And so we think that that's a change that's coming. And the other cool thing we can do is we can do spatial encoding of things, right? I said, anyone that works on any kind of apps these days probably, you have GitHub open, you might have Android Studio open, you might have a bunch of things open, and you're limited to the display space you have. Well, now I can lay those apps around anywhere I want. And before, the number of apps that I would see or were in the foreground might be a couple. With mixed reality, I might have 70 apps open at once and be able to spatially reference them. And so that's a real change that we think is coming. So what are some of the adoption hurdles? One of the biggest adoption hurdles is value, right? We want to have the value overcome the cumbersomeness. If you looked at Google Glass, I don't think the value was there to overcome the awkwardness of wearing it or charging it or all the things that come with making that device work in your body. I actually was the chief architect when I worked for General Dynamics for the Land Warrior system. And soldiers had to make the decision to carry this 7 pounds of equipment into the fight with their already hundreds of pounds of equipment. And it had to have an advantage to them, right? So we actually allowed a squadron to fight like a platoon because they could do maneuvers that they couldn't do before because they know exactly where everyone is. They can do all sorts of things that are pretty cool. The other thing we're kind of missing is we're missing the new principles of mixed reality, right? So you got your smartphone, and everyone, even a little kid, kind of understands how multi-touch works. You can give a 1-year-old an iPad, fiddle with it a little bit, and they can make their apps run and move apps around and things like that. We don't really have that yet for mixed reality. So, there's questions like if I have a mixed virtual room and physical room, and I set something on the table and I come back and the table's gone, is the object floating in space or does it snap to the ground? When I'm talking about our mixed reality, do you map things differently in the space that I'm working with you, and I map it in a different spot, so when I look over here, you're like, what is he looking at, right? And so that visual cueing or reference that you have like in a physical room isn't there in a mixed reality. So we got to figure out how those little details work to make this really work. The other really cool thing that I think is happening is IoT joining in this fight, right? So if I can manipulate virtual objects, well, maybe these lights are IoT objects, physical objects that I can manipulate. Why can't I just grab them and do things with them, right? And so this mapping of virtual objects and physical objects into the real world, we kind of need a uber way of doing that, and we think that's something that's probably coming. And then from an adoption standpoint, I think the biggest thing that we saw in the enterprise, like getting to mobility in the enterprise, took a bunch of people showing up with iPhones and Android phones and tablets, going to IT, why can't I run anything for work on these? And then eventually IT, said, okay, I've got to support these. And they did something to support those devices. And I think the same problem will happen with mixed reality, right? When we start getting headsets or devices that consumers are starting to bring to work to try and do things, it's gonna change the way things happen. It's gonna accelerate this. I think certain industries where hands-free operations are extremely beneficial. A surgeon, high cost environment, hands-free operations are huge. They're probably gonna get customized apps that get pushed down to them from the hospitals, et cetera. But your average Joe using this because he found out that AutoCAD now works in 3D and it's much easier for him to do his initial prototype in mixed reality than it is to do in a traditional CAD kind of environment, he's going to come in and say, why can't I use this at work, right? And we're going to start seeing that happen more and more. So with that, open it up to questions. Again, you can download our tech landscape at cto.citrix.com. And I would love to have, if anyone has any questions, I'll be around this afternoon for the social.